The story started with Yetu, the protagonist, mentioning fish because everyone knows they are living creatures. Also, he brought up the fact that fish have an incredible reproductive rate, with many species existing today that date all the way back to the dawn of time. It was also pointed out that fish might have been considered little more than food by humans, and that anyone could slaughter them due to their lack of defenses. Then Yetu said that he had been through something similar to that awful ordeal. How did Yetu end up where he is? Let's find out. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the action moves to Wakwan. We meet our protagonist Yetu in the middle of the day. She is a new college graduate looking for work, and has come to Wu City to rent an apartment. The real issue was that he had no money when he joined society, so he had to settle for renting a place in the Wu neighborhood. He went on to say that until he got a legitimate job, he had no choice but to suffer through the ordeal of room rental because the locals had questionable histories and nobody wanted to talk to them. Heavy rain occurred one night, making him anxious for an interview the following day. He slept through the downpour since he was hoping it wouldn't ruin his interview. While he was sound asleep in the morning, he was startled awake by the peculiar feeling of water on his leg. Upon opening his eyes, he was taken aback to discover that his room was submerged in water flood. Is it possible that the rain from the night before caused the flood? That was Yetu's question. He was startled to see fish with human faces swaying in the water, when he suddenly became aware of something. It baffled him how this could have been accomplished. The fish even more surprised him when it jumped out of the water and went toward him. Even though he managed to evade the attack, he ended up falling into the water as well. Other fish in the water began biting his hand as he battled, but he quickly shook them off. Ignoring this, the large fish persisted in attempting to attack him. In response, he hastily exited the room and secured the door from the outside. He was shocked and confused, and he didn't know what was going on in this universe. But he was horrified to discover many lifeless bodies floating in the ocean when he peered outside. The fish appeared to have eliminated them. He had a hard time making sense of what was happening since he was so shocked. Out of nowhere, a girl called Kinzeo warned him to be careful because those fish with human faces were going to eat them. But he didn't move an inch. Seo warned him once more that he should leave that area and seek refuge on higher ground. Despite Zia's cries for him to run for his life, Yetu was paralyzed with shock and could not move. However, he managed to escape the fish's attack by running away. Zia informed them that they would be safe for a while after they reached the steps where the water wasn't flowing, because the fish couldn't swim without water. Yetu, perplexed, wanted to know what she meant by those terms, but when the girl saw blood spurting from his palm, she couldn't believe he was hurt. Yetu calmed her down by assuring her it was only a scratch and not anything major. What was going on with those strange fish corpses? He inquired again. Zia said she didn't know since it was like Wei when she woke up. In addition to the high mortality toll, she saw the presence of numerous fish with human faces in the water. After that, she proposed that they ascend to the rooftop, where everyone else was taking cover. Numerous individuals were seen standing on the rooftops of each house as the scene moved to the rooftops. Everyone, even those of questionable origins, seemed to be there, which astonished Yetu. The sight of the entire city submerged in water shocked Yetu as he advanced closer to the balcony to survey his surroundings. After a while, representatives from the government arrived in a helicopter and declared a crisis had occurred in Wu City. They asked everyone to remain calm and wait for the rescue squad to arrive. While you wait for further instructions, they said not to touch the water and to make sure the windows were properly closed at night. The helicopter then took off from the location, after they emphasized again not to touch the water. A man named Old Jang was questioned by an elderly man if he thought there was a connection between the fish and the flood. Jang said he didn't know, but thought it was awful that so many people had perished that morning. Someone yelled out to them out of the blue, telling them to get up and aid someone who was in need. At this, Yetu bolted for the railing, and, just below the rooftop, discovered a boy dangling from a window on the top story. When the youngster realized he could no longer hold on, he begged them to help him up. As the boy started to slip out of the boy's grasp, and the fish swarmed them, Yetu yelled out to Zia to find some ropes. He pleaded with them to save him. When Zia showed in and said that they had searched Uncle's and her room for a rope, but hadn't found one, Yetu had already asked the suspicious guys if they had any. In response, one of the questionable youths made fun of the dangling youngster, claiming that the distance was so short that the boy could easily climb up on his own. Outraged that they were still making fun of individuals in danger, Yetu yelled at them upon hearing this. Out of nowhere, the youngster let out cries of agony as he was being hung, and they hastily returned to the sea. Everybody's eyes were on him as the fish seized his leg and dragged him under the water, a terrifying sight for everybody. As the strange monster abruptly sprouted hands, the boy yelled out for their assistance. Afterwards, Old Jang removed his shirt and politely requested that Yetu do the same. Recognizing they were stranded, Yetu reluctantly consented. They poured water on the tied shirts, and Jang tied them even more. To help the youngster get to his feet, They tossed it into the air for him to grab onto. But as he extended his hand to grasp the improvised rope, his hold relaxed somewhat. In that split second, the fish had the upper hand and was pulling him harder than before. The lad also lost control of his legs this time, sending him tumbling into the pool below. The boy let out a scream of agony as the fish started biting them. The individuals atop the building grew anxious upon witnessing this. What Chia saw horrified her. Old Jang continued by saying that, in his opinion, a dry location is not safe, so he hurriedly urged everyone to return to their apartments and bolt the doors and windows shut. Suddenly, everyone took off sprinting for their rooms. When Yetu saw this, he knew the fish had already made themselves at home in his room. Jang reassured Yetu not to be concerned because he knew Yetu lived on the floor below him, so Yetu was allowed to remain in his room. Because they could take better care of each other if they lived together, Jang proposed that Xia do the same. Xia thought Jang's suggestion was a good one. They proceeded to old Jang's chamber downstairs. The three individuals involved in the story, a graduate named Yetu, a female named Xia who worked odd jobs, a retired veteran named Old Jang, and the protagonist, a graduate named Xia, all had to depend on each other until the rescue crew came. Subsequently, the trio assembled and set up the chamber, taking stock of their food and other resources. They overcame the obstacles and survived their first night in the hotel. Xiao was asked by Yetu to eat something because they would still have to deal with this scenario for a few more days. Xia, on the other hand, claimed to be okay, saying that she had just eaten. After then, Yetu made the comment that nobody had foreseen such a disaster happening. On that day, he was expected to attend multiple interviews, he said. He went on to say that they were worried because they had no idea when the rescue teams would arrive. Unfortunately, she gave an affirmative response and explained that she couldn't reassure her parents that she was okay because her phone didn't have a network. It was really odd, and the silence without water was frightening, so Jang thought it was strange that they hadn't seen the rescue team yet. Out of nowhere, they started to hear the strange fish sounds coming from outside the door, and they started to freak out, trying to figure out what was going on. After that, old Jang begged them to remain quiet. Jang then attempted to listen to the conversations outside by placing his ear to the door. Still pondered the possibility that the creatures scaling the stairs were mutant fish. The noises were coming from upstairs, so Jang answered with a no, as that didn't seem to be the case. At that point, Jang revealed that they were situated on the second level, while old Joe and those brats occupied the third. As he was saying this, Jang became anxious and revealed that it was old Joe's voice shouting to get lost. The brat with the yellow hair, Jang reasoned, had to be up to no good for Joe. Then he told Xia and Yetu that he was going to check it out on his own. Moreover, he specifically instructed them to remain indoors, promising to return instantly after doing his inspection. Even when Yetu begged Jang to reconsider, the door had already been closed by the time he heard his plea. Xia then told Yetu to put the matter out of their minds, explaining that they shouldn't get involved as it was the neighbors' quarrel. A half an hour later, Xia and Yetu were still waiting for Jang to return. It had been some time, but Master Jang still hadn't returned, and this worried Yetu. Xia hinted that perhaps old Jang was chatting with old Joe and the issue had been settled. Subsequently, Yetu rose to his feet and declared that he would ascend to the observation deck to ascertain the matter. Additionally, he requested that she remain inside since he would return later. After that, Xia wanted to know if they might accompany each other to investigate. There was no need to go, Yetu pleaded with her tensely, since what if they encountered those mutant fish? Xia warned him not to put the girls in a bad light after hearing this, saying that he never knew who would be rescuing whom in an emergency. After that, she began getting ready by transforming a stick into a weapon by pasting a ruler and a knife to it. After getting everything ready, she handed Yetu the stick and instructed him on how to handle it correctly. The weapon was simple, but it should be enough for self-defense. Even Yetu was amazed when he saw this. Next, they cautiously unlocked the gate and emerged from the building, each carrying a flashlight, to investigate the situation. However, the staircase fell into a profound quietness as they emerged. After recalling that there were mutants, Yetu continued by saying that the eerie stillness of the stairwell corridor frightened her. Down below, Yetu admonished her once more to keep her eyes peeled as she followed him. They ascended the steps slowly, and after a little distance, Yetu discovered a Swiss Army knife. When Xia inquired as to his discovery, he explained that he was perplexed because he couldn't identify the owner of the army knife he found laying around. He then begged Xia to hold on to it, saying they might need it in the future. His jaw dropped as he blurted out that he, too, had noticed something on the wall. Shockingly, it was blood on the wall that he zeroed in on with the torch. After that, Yetu wanted to know if Xiao had ever seen it before and wondered where it had come from. Xia said she was too busy to answer because she was concerned with organizing several tasks. Afterwards, she wanted to know if it could be related to the person's injuries sustained in the altercation. The more they advanced, the more blood they noticed on the steps. Upon seeing this, Yetu expressed his belief that it could not have come from a wounded individual. After that, Zia carefully examined the blood on the knife. There was a blood trail. Master Zhang was absent for an extended period of time, and Yetu expressed his suspicion that something was amiss. Then he told Xia that Master Zhang might be in danger since he sensed that something was happening, and the mutant fish had definitely ambushed people. However, Xiao reassured him by holding his hand and told him not to worry because she was watching the scenario and her interpretation of it might differ from his. According to her, the blood on the staircase was intentionally splattered. She felt that if someone had been hurt, there should have been a trail of blood all around, even near their room, but nobody had yelled for help. Out of nowhere, a whole new species of beast materialized behind them. Who would have splattered blood all over the staircase? Yet who wondered again, because it was already too late. That yellow brat could be just venting, Xia said, adding that he has done some horrible things in the past. Additionally, she mentioned that she believes the knife was dropped by the yellow brat boy. Maybe it's true what she said. Yetu told her he didn't give a hoot about that guy. Later, Yetu inquired as to whether or not they would be better off going upstairs to find Master Zhang. As he continued to ascend the stairs, he sensed a slick surface at the staircase's edge. It appeared like it was coming from above, but upon closer inspection with the torch he saw it was actually someone's spit. Curious about its origin, he considered it water and wondered who or what was responsible for it. All of a sudden, Yetu knew that something was perched above the staircase. They were shocked to realize, as he pointed the torch towards it, that it was an even more mutant fish, this one with 2 legs and 4 hands. Tension built up in Yetu's body as she saw the mutant fish emerge from the ocean and land on land. To everyone's surprise, the fish showed no signs of attacking. The fact that the fish exhibited zero hostility toward them was peculiar. He shooed the fish away with his stick so he could examine. The mutant fish reacted angrily and dove towards them the second the stick made contact with its whisker. The unexpected assault scared them, but they continued to use the stick as a weapon. They were taken aback when the fish used its hands to walk on land, and even fought back with astonishing ferocity, all while wielding the stick like a weapon. The force of the attack nearly sent Yetu tumbling, but Xiao reached out and caught his hand in the nick of time to keep him from falling. He laid on the stairs after being saved, but the fish quickly drew dangerously near and opened its mouth as if to devour him. Xia swiftly and forcefully struck the fish with the stick, sending it soaring through the air as it prepared to strike. As if on edge, Xia worriedly wanted to know if Yetu was all right or wounded. In response, Yetu joked that it was unclear who had rescued whom. Even though Yetu seized the stick from her, the fish quickly retreated from its position and started to flee as he approached to strike. Even though the fish evaded his strike, Yetu began yelling at it to stay there as it began to swim away. Disregarding the warning, he proceeded to pursue the fish. However, Xia begged him to cease, adding that they had no idea whether there were any further mutant fish nearby. Since Yetu had the impression that something had occurred to Master Zhang, he urged Xia to move quickly and proposed that they head upstairs to locate him. Running for the 3rd level, they were startled to see a bigger and scarier mutant fish waiting for them when they got there. At this point, it was as if one were to come face to face with a fish the size of an elephant or a horse, complete with lengthy tail, legs, and hands. People were spotted. Wondering who was on the floor, Xia inquired. Yetu clarified that it had to be the youngster with yellow hair that she had indicated previously. It was actually Master Zhang, though, who was sneaking up on the mutant fish from behind. The fish was seized by Zhang, who swiftly brandished a knife and began to stab it. Then he yelled at Yetu to grab the chance and get old Joe out of the room. Master Zhang's health was the subject of Yetu's anxious question. Because old Joe had his leg bit off, Zhang told them to go help him first because the situation was critical. After reaching a consensus, they hurried into the room, where they discovered old Joe seated. Joe told them it was okay not to yell. Xia and Yetu, who lived on the same floor as old Joe, were astonished to witness the fish bite off half of his leg. Still bewildered, Yetu demanded to know how the mutant fish had gotten inside the room and what had happened to his limb. Joe described the mutant fish as terrifyingly intelligent. He said that they scaled the neighboring power poles. From the moment they first laid eyes on the mutant fish, Yetu noticed something was off about their appearance. Joe concurred and went on to say that he too had seen that the mutant fish were not dependent on their vision for navigation. He went on to say that he and old Zhang had been hiding quietly since they had barely escaped danger. But a clatter had been made during their climb, and the mutant fish had been sidetracked. He informed them that old Zhang had been missing for quite some time, which had them worried. As a result, they decided to go up to find him. Yetu further by saying that they discovered blood all over the walls of the stairwell. Upon hearing this, old Joe stated that the fish were probably responsible. He noticed some animals acting similarly when the sky grew black and wondered whether it was a territorial marking ritual. The anxious Yetu cried out in disbelief, "Territory?" To which old Joe replied that he had no idea what the fish was up to. "Leaving for the time being," he said, "so they can talk about it later." Jang swooped down on them as they were leaving, stopping them in their tracks. According to Gen, the mutant fish continued to aggressively pursue and devour them even if their origin was a mystery. Jang fought back with a shattered table as an improvised weapon as the mutant fish shrieked and came towards him again. Nevertheless, Jang found it difficult to contend with the mutant fish due to its extraordinary strength. Zhou told Zhao and Yetu to hold tight as he diverted the mutant fish's attention. He emphasized that they shouldn't put themselves in danger to save an elderly disabled guy like Jang, and he pleaded with them to instead concentrate on bringing him along. They wouldn't leave him, Yetu told Zhou, so he shouldn't give up. She went on to say that the mutant fish wouldn't feel comfortable just locked up in a tank. Still, he couldn't find a single useful item while rummaging under his shirt for a weapon. The fact that the knife they had earlier was still stuck in the altered fish's skull was something else he noticed. There were bottles around, but Yetu didn't think they would be of much use because the altered fish would drain their power with a single smash. She requested him help after discovering something and wanted him to examine it. The knife's handle was crafted from wood with sharp edges that could be used as a weapon. Even though it wouldn't be able to puncture the fish's skin, she said it could be efficient at penetrating its mouth and brain. After Yetu considered the proposal, he entrusted Zhao with the care of old Zhou and took the stick made of wood. Jang, meantime, kept fighting the mutant fish, but he was starting to lose ground against it. The mutant fish tried to attack Jang as he was helpless, but luckily Yetu got there in time and stuck the stick into the mouth of the fish. But the fish was quite clingy to the stick. Now Jang and Yetu were working in tandem, using maximum force to advance the stick inside. The mutant fish proved to be too much for even Yu and Jang to handle on their own. Out of nowhere, the fish started forcing them back, which prompted Zhao to dive in and help Yetu, while old Zhou stood by Jang. They were successful in defeating the monster because of their united efforts. Subsequently, they let out a sigh of relief, although the feeling of peril persisted. The origin of the mutant fish monster was a question that Yetu voiced out loud. Since they hadn't heard anything else that could account for its look, Gen wondered if it was connected to the city flood. Afterwards, old Jang told Yetu to collect additional bandages and alcohol, and to organize the medical supplies. Additionally, he told Xia to retrieve all the food and drink containers from the room's cabinets. Before Yu and old Zhou set out to do their separate responsibilities, Yu inquired as to what had transpired at the staircase earlier. Zhou said he watched a Chinese opera on his phone because he was bored. Nevertheless, those two slime balls simply could not stand it and proceeded to engage him in combat. The mutant beast ambushed them as they were fighting through the window. Jang said the monster might have been drawn to the sound because it could be moving around with echolocation. A child named Mark showed up out of nowhere while they were sorting through the wreckage, and he was surprised to see the monster lifeless and wondered aloud whether they had actually defeated it. After that, Mark called out to his pal and began searching for him. He gasped in horror at the sight of his friend's dead body. Blaming old Zhou for listening to some shitty opera for attracting the monster fish, Mark yelled out and blamed him for the situation. Also, he lost it with Jang, accusing him of letting their feuds get in the way of his efforts to rescue Chen. Jang got to his feet upon hearing this, and, while yelling at Mark to stop, punched him in the face. If Mark had been so courageous throughout the altercation, he was then questioned by the monster where he had been when it attacked. Tensely, Mark asked whether there was anything wrong with wanting to stay alive. No matter how deep their animosity, old Jang yelled at Mark angrily, telling him that he and Jang must respect each other and not cause trouble if Mark wants to live. He let Mark's go, collar, and told him to return when he had gathered all the useful things in his own room. It was completely unexpected, according to Yetu, who started to dwell on their current situation, as the mutant fish may swallow anyone at any moment. She stressed that they had no choice but to work together, regardless of how much they disliked the other person. He went on to say that afterwards, they barricaded themselves everywhere and barred the staircase below to stop any more mutant fish from getting up. It was now midnight after all the necessary activities had been completed, including placing the injured old Zhou on the bed. In an effort to forget about the ordeal involving the mutant fish, most individuals went to sleep. The next morning, while everyone was still asleep, the scene changed. Out of nowhere, Yetu perceived what sounded like someone swimming in the water, splashing. He peered out the window, and was astounded to see a school of fish darting around in the ocean below. Someone else from the other building was also watching them, but for some reason, they too opened the window. This person was Yetu. Upon its opening, the entire school of fish dashed in its direction and scrambled inside. The youngster then began to wailing in agony. Yetu was so startled by this that she hid behind the curtain. Jang became anxious and sought Yetu's explanation, after noticing a dramatic shift in Yu's expression. When Jen heard Yetu tell him to be quiet, he bolted for the window to see what was happening. He too was startled. Jang then requested that Yetu locate some masking tape so they could secure the windows. Gradually, they taped the glass shut, preventing the fish from swimming in. Gen proceeded to inform everyone that the mutant fish had previously attacked the survivors in the building across from them. Do not approach the windows, he warned them, for their own protection. Inquiring about the food supplies, Jang questioned Zhao over the ration arrangements. Zia said that they had enough food to last for 10 days when they added it to what they received from Old Joe and Mark. But there was an acute lack of potable water, which posed the greatest challenge. Her best guess was that they wouldn't last more than a week. Next, Gen detailed how the plan called for them to wait for the rescue team to come for a week. While the entire city was submerged in water, Mark, his face betraying a mix of confusion and anger, demanded to know why there was an insufficient supply. No one was going to stop Jang from feeding the fish, she said angrily to Mark. Afterwards, Yetu broke the terrible news regarding the medical supplies, stating that there were only 3 rolls of bandages remaining, half a bottle of alcohol, and that Old Joe required water for bandage changes and wound washings. The fact that they were without antiseptic medication was the most critical issue, according to Yetu. Old Joe reassured Jang that he wouldn't need to waste resources because he was tough. On the other hand, Mark delivered a sardonic remark regarding Old Joe, implying that Joe had created a mess and now desired their assistance in cleaning it up. When Jian heard this, he lost it and slammed the table in frustration. He asked Mark if he had had enough of his inane babble and threatened to kick him out of the room if he persisted in spewing more gibberish. Mark, in an angry outburst, demanded to know whether he had said anything incorrectly by bringing attention to the fact that they were running out of food and water. Since they were in a somewhat safe situation, he didn't see why they should even contemplate leaving. Additionally, Mark raised the concern that they might have to help a handicapped person advance further, leading Mark to doubt whether Jai intended to send them to their deaths. The moment Jang had a chance to reply, Zia yelled out for them to cease their altercation. She advocated that they put aside their differences and work together to find a solution to the pressing issue at hand. In order to make the young people like them last a little longer, she then suggested that they not divide the food and water evenly. In order to keep his wounds from becoming infected, she also told Master Joe to keep moisture out of them. Additionally, she advised Joe to use the kettle's unboiled water to clean the wound if necessary. In response, Old Joe said it was fine with him as he wouldn't put any undue stress on them. In order to cut down on perspiration and water loss, Zia informed everyone that they should limit physically demanding tasks. Likewise, Jang stressed the need of everyone having to endure a bit in order to survive until the rescue crew came. Yetu concluded by saying that they had distributed the food and drink in accordance with Zia's recommendation. The food, however, gradually depleted as the days went by. Additionally, he mentioned that everyone was staring out the window, anticipating the arrival of rescuers. But all you could hear outside the window were the survivors' pathetic calls for help. Nothing, not even the sound of someone yelling or cries emanating from the window, had been heard up until the 6th day. The next scenario took place 6 days later, while Old Joe lay on the bed in a terrible state. Jang was queried by Yetu over the health of Old Joe. According to Jang, Joe's prognosis was dismal because his fever had persisted and his wounds had become infected. After that, Gen wanted to know from Zia how much water and food they still had. Unfortunately, she had to tell them that while there was still some food, the water will run out the following day. Yetu then realized he had very little water in his bottle and reached for it. He was about to take a sip when suddenly, he brought the water over to Xia, and, for some reason, interrupted Yetu, telling her to drink it as she hadn't had any throughout the day. She said refused, adamantly stating that she didn't need to drink water, and that they should save it for Old Joe. Jang interrupted them, saying, "Stop talking." He had just heard something. Jang jumped up and walked over to the window to double-check his suspicions after attentively listening. "It's the sound of a helicopter," Jang exclaimed with astonishment. His mood brightened at catching sight of the helicopters. Jang then gave the signal for everyone to fasten their shoelaces and gather their belongings, saying that they had to be on their way to the rooftop as soon as possible. As he saw this, Mark sat quietly. Jang demanded that he assist with packing and yelled at him. Then Gen invited Yeti to join him, explaining that they could aid Old Joe together. So, the two of them entered the room and began to carry Old Joe. Outside, Xia was gathering her belongings, but Mark shoved her aside and dashed alone towards the room's exit in order to reach the rooftop. Seeing him fleeing, Xia anxiously warned him not to run and to be careful since the stairs might contain mutant fish, but Mark ignored her and continued sprinting away. Jang and Yeti returned with Old Joe, and Xia revealed that the brat had fled on his own. In contrast, the team's captain, RQA, ordered the other helicopters to stay in formation as they were still 25 kilometers from their target. From above, a trooper called Chang was equally taken aback by what appeared to be a post-apocalyptic landscape. From atop a nearby structure, he beheld a person frantically pleading for assistance. Since there was a survivor on the rooftop, Chang requested that the pilot reduce the height. There had been no orders to rescue anyone, the pilot said anxiously. Chang was adamant that they prioritize bringing in the survivor, because the helicopters might still transport more people. Mark sprinted towards the aircraft as they reluctantly brought it down. Assisted by the soldiers, he was able to gain entry. They needed to get out of the apartment quickly if there weren't any more people there. So Chang wanted to know. Nervous and convinced that he was the sole survivor, Mark yelled out that they needed to get out of there fast since he had heard this. Therefore, Chang ordered the pilot to swiftly climb to a higher altitude and trail the soldiers. Others had already climbed up to the rooftop by this point, and Yeti had yelled down urging them to remain there since they were still there. After Chang heard this, he looked down and was taken aback to see them. Even more unexpectedly, he discovered Master Zhang among them. Mark had just said there was no one remaining, so Chang furiously demanded to know why. Mark became anxious and said he had no idea who they were as he didn't know them. Captain ordered them to return to formation, as they were suddenly told that their mission was of the utmost importance. The pilot urged Chang to reflect, saying that they had to move forward with other people. Chang continued to worry about Master Zhang and proceeded to bring his supply bag to Zhang and the others. The other soldiers were taken aback by the sight and demanded to know what Chang had done with their supplies. In response, Chang said that he tossed the supply bag because it would give Zhang and the others a fighting chance for a few more days. Meanwhile, Yu yelled out that the rescued people didn't care about material possessions and simply wanted to be saved, pleading with the chopper to take them to safety. All of the helicopters suddenly advanced, shocking Zhang and the rest. A soldier in the helicopter approached Chang and inquired if he was familiar with the individuals gathered on the rooftop. Yes, Chang said, going on to say that his former instructor was the one who transported the wounded old survivor. He proceeded to explain that he had met Instructor Zhang during his time in the Special Forces, and that the two had spent 3 years together adjusting to army life. Instructor Zhang had already resigned half a year before to his last encounter with him, which occurred during his deployment to the central area. Then Chang confessed that he was surprised to see Master Zhang again, and expressed his desire that they could stay together until the army returned from their mission. On hearing this, Mark scoffed and said that old Zhang was just a drowsy old man. He went so far as to tell Chang that the old guy Zhang was irrational and violent, so Chang had to go through a lot. Zhang became enraged upon hearing this and threatened Mark with a gunshot afterward. Surprised, Mark wanted to know what was going on. Chang said that he had realized Mark wasn't a decent human being some time ago. Mark, flustered, begged old Zhang to lay down the gun since he thought he had a disagreement with Chang's instructor. Chang shot back that it didn't matter if Mark had resentment toward his instructor. What mattered was that Mark would have to eat bullets if he dared to impede their objective going forward. Mark gave a positive response. Then their captain gave them another message, this time confirming that they had arrived at their target. They had to execute the operation as soon as they reached the buildings. It was unanimously agreed upon. After a few minutes, the Alpha 3 chopper reported finding a huge school of mutant fish, and promptly began firing to wipe them out. Slowly but surely, everyone followed their lead and began shooting the mutant fish in an effort to kill them. Mark shut his ears in terror at the sound of gunfire. He finally opened his eyes and ears after a few minutes, when everything around him was silent. Then Chang advised the other chopper that they were en route and prepared for action, and that it was Alpha 8 speaking. As Mark bewilderedly asked Chang whether the army weren't in the safe home, he saw helicopters land on a rooftop and troops emerging from it. In his sorry, Chang admitted that he had forgotten to inform him that their mission wasn't to rescue people but rather had a definite objective, and that it was his decision to pick him up. After that, Chang and others sprinted outside the aircraft, advising Mark that he was on his own from then on. The focus turned to Zhang and the others, and we saw him yelling out his displeasure and anger. Jen was slamming Mark's door in his face, calling him a coward for returning a comrade's compassion with evil, and for leaving their side. She couldn't understand how someone like that could be called a man. The government's obvious falsehood that help was on the way even had him yell at them. Master Zhang's tension was palpable, so Zhao voiced her belief that the army needed to prioritize their objective and not waste time taking them on board. Because Yetu believed the army had supplied them, and the rescue support was close behind, he too agreed with Zhao. After that, Yetu questioned why they would provide supplies if they didn't intend for them to stay alive for at least a few more days. Zhang expressed his apologies to everyone for his emotional breakdown. Master Zhang must be exhausted, Xia said, suggesting he take a break while she sorted everything. Still, Zhang was in a bad place, so Yetu urged him to pick himself up since he could see logic in Zia's words. As there was no way to save them right now, Gen said he would be honest. Why? Yetu said in astonishment upon hearing this. Thereafter, Zhang revealed that he had recognized the helicopter's number. It had originated from a city base, meaning that the tragedy had affected not just Wukan City, but also the coastal cities. Even though they were only regular folks, The heads of state would be the ones in need of rescue during this time. Gin went on to say that they needed to be mentally ready since they were on their own, if they wanted to survive. After then, Jang wanted to know from Xiao if anything was valuable. According to Xiao, there were a few packs of biscuits, some canned food and medical supplies, but no water bottles. Along with bringing out a binocular, she also brought up the fact that there was some military gear. Xia yelled out in shock as she pulled out a rifle and demanded that Yetu examine it as she peered through the binoculars. After that, Xia requested that Master Jang examine the firearm. Following a thorough examination, Jang revealed that the handgun in question was a Beretta 92. Jin requested Xia to hand over the bag to him since he was curious to find out what else could be put within. There were a lot of stuff inside, they discovered after searching. Later on, Zhang revealed that they were well prepared in terms of self-defense, but that they were severely undersupplied in terms of food, water, and medical supplies. 2 bottles of water were all that were available, as Xiao pointed out. As soon as Jang heard this, she started to feel anxious and even voiced her concern that they shouldn't risk drinking water from the outdoors. In addition to the risk of eating genetically modified fish, they had no idea whether the water was even drinkable. Jang proceeded to inform everyone that they should think about alternative ways to find water. With the binoculars in hand, he peered out the window. After that, Yetu wanted to know whether John had found anything. After then, John gave Yetu the binoculars and told him to look across the street. Looking through the binoculars, Yetu noticed a pharmacy and a grocery store situated near the junction. After then, he wanted to know if Jang was talking about those locations. Yes, Jang said, adding that the fact that the main door was shut showed that nobody had taken the goods stored there since the disaster. After listening to Zhang explain everything, Yetu nervously wanted to know whether Zhang was thinking about going to the stores across the street to acquire water and medicine. Jang said yes, justifying his choice by saying it was the finest strategy he had come up with. After that, Jang got a sheet of paper and began to sketch out their immediate area. He pointed out to Xiao and Yetu on the map that the only place they could acquire clean water and medicine was at the food shop and pharmacy down the street. A block separated them from the stores, he added. The fact that getting there wouldn't be easy was a source of anxiety for Yetu, who voiced his worries. Yes, Gin acknowledged the difficulty, but he reassured them that they could do the assignment in one of 2 ways. Gin proceeded to describe the first approach, which comprised navigating the blocks using boards. Gradually, they would reach the rooftop, and then descend from the 2nd story to reach the business. She countered by saying that the initial approach was flawed because they had no idea how to get to the rooftop, and had no idea how far apart the blocks were. Jang listened to Xi out, and then clarified that there was a backup plan. The second alternative, according to Zhang, was to climb up the covered cable wires on the 2nd floor and enter via the window. However, he warned that this was an extremely risky proposition because it was near the ocean. These were his only viable options for getting to the stores at the moment, and he was at a loss for what to do next. After giving the map a thorough once-over, she paused to think about it. She smiled slightly and said that she thought the second approach would work if they tried it at night. Upon hearing this, Jang and Yetu were taken aback and inquired about it. Zia replied, saying that she wasn't sure whether they'd noticed, but mutant fish had been extremely noisy during the day and unusually silent at night for the last several days. Assuming they remained below the water's surface while they slept, mutant fish posed no danger to anybody who stayed out of their reach. Nighttime encounters with other types of mutant fish were the problem, which Yetu nervously explained. Zia said that she had noticed the same thing, and from what they had seen before, the mutant fish didn't appear to have eyes while they were out at night. There would be zero issue with them if they could stay away from the mutant fish. Jang concurred with Zia, admitting that her theory may be correct. Then he informed them that he would ascend the wires while they remained in the room to provide protection. Zia and Jang stared at Yetu in perplexion as he yelled out a resounding no. The fact that Jang had previously looked after them was enough to convince Yetu to request that he take charge this time. Finally, Yetu got his chance to step up and perform his share of the labor. Jang attempted to refute it, but Yetu cut him off and added that someone light would be needed to climb those ropes. After hearing this, Zia agreed with Yetu and realized that they had completely disregarded the importance of weight. Jang paused to consider their requests before agreeing to move forward in the manner they had proposed. Now it was nightfall, and Yetu was preparing his equipment. He then told everyone to get ready since it was time to leave. He was carrying a rope that Jang had told Yetu to pull in case he got into difficulties. Jang would then rush over to help. Along with something else, Zia gave him a weapon she had crafted for self-defense. To make it stronger than before, she said, she tied a metal pipe and a knife together using metal thread. Next, Yetu placed the weapon in his bag. Zia and Jang were in agreement, and Jang told Yetu to utilize it. He emphasized the importance of not wasting ammunition when confronted with danger and encouraged Yetu to remember how he had taught him to utilize it. Okay was Yetu's response as she urged them to exercise caution. He promised to come back as soon as he got water and medicine. Jang lowered Yetu into the cable's path after that. That other character in the twist was in the city, peering through binoculars at Yetu. Upon witnessing Yetu, a girl confided in her companion that she hadn't anticipated anyone else making it through, but she proceeded to say that those survivors were much more terrifying than the mutant fish. Much to Yetu's relief, he landed securely on the cables. The strength of the cables was another question Jang had. Jang was told by Yetu that the cables were fine and could support his weight, so he may let go of the rope. Upon touching down, he got to his feet and assessed the situation. Seeing that he would have to traverse the water's surface, he resolved to move cautiously, step by step. With deliberate, measured steps, Yetu advanced. He was on the verge of plunging into the sea when a wire lock snapped, releasing his hold on the device. But he caught himself on the wire in the nick of time. As Jang and Zia witnessed Yetu's delicate predicament, the shattered piece landed in the sea, shocking them. After he managed to avoid harm, Evanu let out a sigh of relief, but his joy was fleeting. The sound of rushing water sent shivers down his spine as he worried that it might be the mutant fish. The mutant fish came bursting out of the water and lunged for him, confirming his worst fears. Everyone was on edge, not knowing what to do after witnessing the scene. Sighing with relief, the mutant fish fled back into the sea, having narrowly dodged a serious danger. To their amazement, it couldn't reach the height of the cable. Still, he continued onward. He continued on his way, till he came upon something that shocked him. As for Jang, he told Zia that he had stopped tracking Yetu's progress, and was guessing that he should have reached the third block by now. Zia, on the other hand, cautioned Jang to look again, saying that Yetu had been pointing the torch in their direction. Jang was concerned that Yetu would be in trouble again after watching this. Through the binoculars he peered, he saw that the wire had been cut to a certain length, blocking Yetu's path to the third block. Jang was surprised to see that this could only have been done by humans as he examined it more closely. This realization prompted him to question if there were any other survivors in the area. Jang told Zia that things had gotten really tricky, so they signaled for Yetu to come back. Zia motioned for Yetu to return, and he nodded, saying he would try to go back via the rooftop. Astonished by what he saw through a window, Yetu cautiously made his way back. When Yetu noticed a jar of water inside the building, his shock transformed into interest. Zia emphasized the importance of Jang using the binoculars to focus on Yetu's signals. Yetu was signaling to Jang that he wanted to go into the middle building, Jang noticed. As Jang approached the room, he wondered if Yetu had discovered anything useful. The room was vacant when Yetu entered there through the window at the same time. Unfazed, he went up to the water container and poured some into his bottle. While Yetu was filling his water bottle, he was interrupted by a sound coming from within the cupboard. Take note, in his first state of wonder, his emotions quickly shifted to terror and shock upon seeing a cage inside the cabinet housing a captive mutant fish. As soon as Yetu's surprise at seeing the mutant fish in the tank became apparent, she recoiled in fear. Even more perplexing was the fact that he detected an odd sensation beneath his foot. He was shocked to see a woman's lifeless body when he looked down. Henry, a bald guy, sprang out of nowhere and calmed Yetu's fears by telling her that the woman had breached his rules and had been dead for days. Unsettlingly, he confessed to disposing of her but also said that he enjoyed baiting the mutant fish with the flesh from the dead woman. Henry was asked by Yetu, who was taken aback by the news, whether he had indeed gotten rid of the woman. Henry gave his word, detailing how she had clambered up the wires from the next room, and insisted on having water given to her at no cost, refusing to barter for anything else. She kept pleading, saying her daughter needed water badly. The woman only needed water for her daughter, which horrified Yetu, and Henry's behavior surprised him. Henry replied by saying he felt bad for the woman's daughter, but that the situation was bad anyway. Henry's comparison of the thieving to the mutant fish sent shivers down Yetu's spine. Accusing Yetu of wanting to steal water like the woman, Henry suddenly gripped his neck firmly. He said that Yetu had to perish because he would take care of Yetu personally. Quickly evading Henry's assault, Yetu reached out and grabbed his hand, telling him to relax and stressing the importance of teamwork for survival. But Henry's reaction was disturbing. He chortled and then demanded that Yetu give up all of his possessions, offering a painless death in exchange. In a ferocious retaliation, Yetu confronted Henry with a rod. Seeing Yetu arm-shocked Henry. Despite their battle, Henry complimented Yetu on his speed and agility, implying that he had recently eaten. After thinking about how advantageous it would be to wipe Yetu from the map, Henry's expression changed to one of satisfaction. Yet he rushed at Henry, but the self-assured Henry smiled and ducked, proving that he could defeat Yetu. But destiny had other plans. The mutant fish seized Henry's hand, drew him in, and bit him brutally. The chamber resounded with Henry's cries of agony as he begged Yetu for assistance. The mutant fish was the target of Yetu's rapid gun retrieval and aim. The sight of the gun startled Henry, who then told Yetu to shoot the fish without thinking twice. As Henry begged Yetu to shoot and save him from certain death, his cries became increasingly frenzied. Fear gripped Yetu, and she hesitatingly hesitated, even though the situation was critical. Henry's voice echoed once more as he demanded to know what Yetu was up to, asking if he wanted the mutant fish to bite him to death. Henry's scathing accusations against Yetu, including his alleged habit of leaving people to die and his remorse over not getting rid of him sooner, stung hard. The intensity of the moment, along with Henry's statements, caused Yetu's consciousness to slip away. The confusion of the occasion overcame him, and he shot aimlessly while in a stupor. Jiang and Zhao were paralyzed with horror as they heard the gunfire. In his anxious haste to locate Yetu, Jiang told Zhao to look after herself and Zhou. Jiang swiftly lowered himself onto the cables using a rope. Henry had obviously been discarded while we were near Yetu. Since Yetu's primary goal had been to save Henry, he was taken aback by the change of events and pondered how it had come to pass. He was startled to hear a voice calling out to him from the window. He motioned for Yetu to relax as he brazenly pointed the rifle at Jiang, who he had mistaken for the target. Then Jiang pressed Yetu for details about what had transpired shortly before, including why and who he had shot. Jiang anxiously inquired about their whereabouts as she took stock of her surroundings. Henry assaulted Natu, who was upset because he was trying to fetch water, and he also assaulted the woman who was lying on the floor. Additionally, Yetu clarified that Henry was bitten by the mutant fish in the tank during the altercation. He intended to shoot the fish to rescue Henry, but instead shot Henry instead. Jiang reassured Yetu that he shouldn't be worried because the situation was not his fault but rather the result of Henry's increasingly sinister character traits, which had developed during the crisis. Next, Jiang told Yetu not to be hard on himself because now was not the time to do so. They had to search the room for any useful items. In order to gather materials, they cautiously continued into the room next to it. The mutant fish, meantime, saw them leave the room and cautiously removed the keys to Henry's cage. While exploring the room, Yetu spotted a carton of snacks and some food rations in the cabinet. He informed Jiang that he had discovered food supplies and household goods. The fact that Jiang discovered a plethora of water bottles in the cupboard was another item he brought up. During the crisis, Yetu saw that there were a lot of water jugs and assumed that they had been stolen from people or the grocery shop. Later on, Jiang revealed his concern that Henry had attacked other individuals. Additionally, he urged Yetu to concentrate on gathering as much as they could and not to fret over it too much. Zhao, meanwhile, was waiting by the window for Jiang and Yetu with much anticipation. Out of nowhere, someone climbed up a rope and into her chamber, much to her astonishment. She tried to yell for assistance, startled, but before she could, the girl told Xia not to be scared as she covered her mouth, saying that they were simply seeking cover for the moment. Incredulous, Xia wanted to know who they were and whether they had survived the same way she had. The girl confirmed that they had survived the disaster and gave an affirmative response. Suddenly, Xia heard a different voice announcing their temporary safety. It turned out to be a boy as Xia noticed. Something else the youngster said was that the mutant fish hadn't pursued them. The focus shifted back to Jiang and Yetu, who were crammed to the gills with belongings. After that, Jiang brought a water bottle over to Yetu. Yetu appeared somewhat downcast as he drank. Jiang noticed this and wanted to know if he was still thinking about the recent incident, so she questioned what was bothering him. Even though the person was deserving of death, Yetu admitted that it broke his heart to have missed his shot and shot them anyhow. Jiang proceeded to tell Yetu that he was like a soldier he had trained before. Jiang proceeded to tell the story of a man named Chang. Chang had a rough go of it in Special Forces training, but he finally succeeded in eliminating an enemy on his first mission. After that, he changed into someone else entirely. Additionally, Jiang revealed that he consistently observed Chang imbibing in beer. He thought that first kills were fraught with emotional turmoil, because the victim could have been an opponent or a genuinely wicked person. It came down to honoring life, but he was concerned that, as the disaster mounted, some of that reverence might erode. Jiang then urged Yetu to be quiet because they had to be back quickly. Suddenly, they heard a noise behind them just as they were about to depart. Astonished and acting suspiciously, Yetu hurried over to the cabinet to take a look. Upon noticing this, Jiang inquired about the situation. To this, Yetu said that he suspected someone or something had shifted the cabinet. Surprising Jiang, Yetu revealed that something was hiding behind the cabinet as he glanced behind it. Interestingly, they were able to shift the cabinet in some way, and to their horror, they discovered a gaping hole in the wall when they peered around its back. They discovered a bridge made of cables connecting the two chambers when they peered inside. Jiang stated that he assumed Henry was responsible after seeing this. Henry must have taken items from the adjacent room when he severed the cables outside. Additionally, Yetu clarified that this was the reason why Henry's room had an excessive amount of groceries. There was no need to speculate. The extent of the combat outside the city exceeded their estimates, which astonished Jiang as well. All of a sudden, Yetu had an idea and asked Jiang why the pharmacy shouldn't be close to the room. Surprisingly, a small girl was visible in the other room as Yetu turned on the torch to peer through the window. Yetu couldn't help but wonder if the girl was indeed the woman's child. Jiang agreed with Yetu that the girl might be the woman's kid, and he considered the possibility seriously. Jiang proceeded to inform Yetu that they were compelled to rescue the child since they could not abandon her in the room. Thus, they cautiously traversed the room using the cables. They found exactly what they were looking for when they entered: a wide selection of medications, including bandages and antiseptics. A sudden object fell to the floor, capturing Yu's eye. However, Jiang admonished Yetu to disregard it, stressing that their primary objective should be to locate the young girl. As a result, they cautiously made their way into the room next to it. As they entered the room, they noticed various medical equipment. Out of nowhere, Yetu heard a voice calling out from the next cupboard. From his vantage point on the other side, Jiang gave the order for Yetu to open the door. In an attempt to defend herself, the small girl sprang out of the house the second Yetu opened the door, brandishing a knife and slashing at the air with her eyes shut. With accusations leveled against them, she was yelling at them to stay away. She insisted they leave and keep away as she kept slicing the knife. The girl hesitated for an instant as Jiang and Yetu signaled their intention to surrender by raising their hands in the air. After that, Jen pleaded with her to lay down the knife, assuring her that the individuals she was dealing with were not evil, despite her assumptions to the contrary. They merely needed medicine and water, and they had no intention of harming anyone. The little girl began to sob, but Yetu calmed her by telling her not to worry since they had already dealt with the villain. Lily was the name of the little daughter. After that, Lily lost her footing and began to sob, demanding to know why her mother was not returned to her. She begged them again and again to return her mother to her. A mutant fish was slowly making its way towards the source of the sound. The front door of Shia's chamber was even crossed by the mutant fish. According to the young man in the room, they were still missing one fish. The girl felt bad for Shia since she noticed how depressed and exhausted she looked, so she gave Shia a glass of water. They didn't even have enough water to drink, so the boy yelled at the girl and asked what she was doing. A bottle of water wouldn't be too much of recompense, the girl yelled at the lad, since those people had brought them inside out of kindness. Looking at their guns and equipment, Shia thought they were probably not from Wakwan, so she spoke up. The girl proceeded to express her regret for the delay in introducing herself. She made her debut with the introduction of. She plays the role of Lai, a fierce archer. She was practicing archery at the archery range when the disaster occurred, Lu added. They escaped together shortly after the incident began, and she later introduced the youngster as Li, who worked as a bodyguard at the archery range. Afterwards, Li produced a shotgun and revealed that he had snatched it during his escape. He had found it to be an invaluable weapon in his fight against the mutant fish and humans. To which she responded with astonishment, "Deal with humans. What do you mean? What's the situation outside?" "The battle for humanity's survival has only just started," Les said, adding that things could become far worse in the road. In a nervous tone, Shia wanted to know if everyone had begun fighting. Then Li inquired as to what was their cause for concern, and they were assured that, similar to their treatment of those foolish thugs, they would swiftly eliminate any would-be robbers. Incredulous, Xia inquired whether they had already murdered 2 individuals upon hearing this. Lao yelled at Li, questioning his sanity for bringing that up in the presence of an unknown person. Since those 2 thugs had taken advantage of him for so long, Li maintained that it was justified to let them die. Since Liu could tell that Xia was becoming anxious, she calmly reassured her that the attack was in self-defense and that innocent people were not targeted. Li concurred, stating that Sister Lu was right, but that they didn't have to try to reason with irrational people in that situation. They had to use all the resources at their disposal to stay safe. Scared, Shia questioned, even for self-defense, why do they need to harm people? Lu reassured her that they were trying to explain their situation clearly, explaining that they were unable to stop the violence. Li noticed this and told Lu to hold her breath since Shia would have to figure it out for herself sometime. There was no need to explain it to her. They would leave and go to their target as soon as the outside monster departed, so Shia shouldn't give them too much attention, he warned. It was his sincere wish that they could reunite without escalating their animosity. Li was taken aback by the monster's sudden appearance and wanted to know what they should do when it entered the pharmacy building. Reacting anxiously, Zhao yelled out the names of Jiang the Old and Yetu upon hearing this. Liu inquired of Zhao whether her 2 companions were within the drugstore building after being taken aback by her words. After Liu was informed, Zhao confirmed with a yes and wanted to know how. Standing up, Liu reached for her bow. As soon as Zhao noticed this, he anxiously sought Liu's explanation. After then, Liu wanted to know if Li believed they went to the drugstore because Zhao and her companions were in need of medication. Since one of Shia's teammates was hurt, Li said yes, because it was likely, but they would require it if they took shelter in the grocery store. Lu made it clear that she hoped the conflicts would end soon. Uncertainty and tension gripped Xia. After that, we cut to the mutant fish that couldn't see entering the drugstore block on the opposite side of the screen. There was another mutant fish in the area that could see and swim. Bigger mutant fish would devour the seeing mutants. In the meantime, Zhang provided Lily a water bottle and urged her to eat gently because she appeared to be eating extremely quickly in another room. Lily snatched the water bottle and began to gulp it down in a flash. Upon witnessing this, Zhang expressed his concern that the child was likely suffering from severe starvation. Even though the girl was emotionally stable, he advised Yetu to take advantage of the situation to take care of all the medical matters. Thus, Yetu turned around and noticed a plethora of empty bottles scattered on the table. He made up his mind to go in search of booze and bandages. In an instant, he spotted a cabinet and pried it open. However, within, he found all the already used stuff. Yetu was fortunate since he discovered a first aid kit in the cabinet's lower bracket. He was overjoyed to see so many practical things inside when he opened it. Within the bag, he discovered a journal as well. In the meantime, across the room, John was trying to get Lily to fill him in on what had transpired in the past few days and whose whereabouts, but she was still silent. The reason they had come was to get some water and emergency medicine, so John reassured her that they weren't nasty people and urged her to trust them despite her low spirits. Out of nowhere, Yetu motioned for Master Zhang to turn to the cabinet. Zhang got to his feet and probed Yetu for the scoop. Zhang was requested by Yetu to peruse the journal. Inside, Zhang discovered the first aid kit's instructions. It was appropriate, according to Yetu, since they required the entire bag. Realizing that elderly Joe required the medication made Zhang pleased as well. Out of nowhere, Lily grabbed the journal from the elderly Zhang, much to their shock. Angry because they had just claimed to require water and medicine, Lily began yelling that they were all deceivers. Subsequently, she revealed that her mother had entrusted her with the family's valuable possessions, which were also intended for theft. Zhang then pleaded with Lily to pay attention, explaining that they had a fellow soldier in critical condition whose life depended on the bag. However, Lily became quite irritated with them and yelled out that everything was an elaborate hoax, causing her to refuse to hand over the bag. Gen then began to approach her stealthily while apologizing and expressing how desperately they needed the bag. Yetu saw this and wanted to know what Zhang was up to, but just as Zhang was about to answer, he got. In a surprise attack, the mutant fish drew Young closer to itself while its tongue around his face. Lily and Yetu were taken aback and terrified, unsure of what to do in that terrifying time. Young was carried around the floor by the mutant fish, which pulled him fiercely. After what seemed like an eternity, the fish finally let go, allowing Young to pull out his revolver. To escape the mutant fish's clutches, Young continued firing shots at its tongue. Interestingly, he was able to crack the fish's tongue, but the monster resorted to attacking Young when he was attempting to remove the remaining portion of the tongue. Yetu stepped in and used an oxygen cylinder to assault the fish this time. Young and Yetu were both launched towards the wall, as the fish replied by slamming Young with its tail in response to her repeated strikes. Yetu drew her gun and opened fire as the fish reapproached them. The altered fish drew back and sought refuge. Young then sent Yetu the silent signal that everything was all right by answering yes when Yetu asked if he was okay. From out of nowhere, Lily snatched Young's gun from the floor, just as he was about to shoot. The sight of her startled Young, who promptly cautioned her against carelessness, mentioning that the gun was loaded. Young assured Lily they could negotiate under pressure, but he insisted she give him the rifle back before they could talk. The fact that they were armed led Lily to rebelliously declare that they must be evildoers. Still, he yelled at Lily, warning her not to make matters worse because they were in a precarious situation. Young was warned by Yetu to be cautious when the fish suddenly appeared again. Fortunately, the fish missed them and hit a shelf next to them. Young and Yetu ducked behind the shelf to shield Lily and themselves from the pesky fish. Lily grew anxious as the fish crept closer, and Young and Yetu were both ensnared by the shelf, making it impossible for them to release their grip. Even though Yetu and Young thought their condition was bad, Lily surprised them all by shooting at the fish without even glancing at it. For the same reason that Yetu and Young shut their eyes, the bullets frightened them. As soon as the gunshots stopped, they gingerly opened their eyes to see the mutant fish lifeless. Lily continued to point the gun at the mutant fish even after they retreated from the shelf. Young walked up to her, reassured her that the fish had already died, and urged her to relax. After telling Lily the gun was dangerous for her to carry, he tried to return it to her. But Lily swiftly drew her palm back, attempting to shield the revolver from Young's reach. After that, Young assured Lily that they would no longer steal her belongings and pleaded with her to return the revolver. They needed to make a commitment to Lily before they could steal the first aid box, she yelled. From across the water, it was clear that a school of mutant fish was forming a beeline for the drugstore. Lee saw this and told Lu and Xia that it seems like all the mutant fish in the area had been drawn to the ruckus. After hearing this, Shia's anxiety levels rose, and she began to fret over Young and Yetu. Then Lee that they utilize the rope's length to traverse the rooftops. But before they did so, he requested that Shia establish terms, since he was heading to the pharmacy block to retrieve an item. If the pharmacy had plenty of everything, he asked that they assist her other soldiers, so that everyone may take what they desired. Assuming they were both able to make it out alive though, whatever Yetu and Young looted would rightfully be theirs. As long as Yetu and Young made it back safely, Shia was fine with anything, so she agreed to this condition. Then Lu extended the bow to Lee, advising him to bring it along since it could be useful in an emergency. But Lee turned it down, saying he wouldn't use it. He went on to say that they needed to get Shia's house in order, because their true motives had come to light, and she might no longer perceive them as decent people. After Lee finished his task, Lu told him not to worry about them and emphasized the significance of returning right away. With a okay as his response, Lee headed for the rooftop, where he would eventually reach the drugstore block. It was a horrifying sight, as all the mutant fish started climbing inside the drugstore building. At the same time, we returned to Lily and the others, where Young and Yetu had already accepted Lily's vow. In her request, Lily urged them to honor their word. Young promised her that they would certainly honor their promise. In her anxious and desperate state, Lily wanted to know when they could get out of here. Because they had to attend to their friend's injuries first, Young said they couldn't just go. He assured them they would fulfill their commitment once his health improved. To find out if anyone had made it out of the drugstore block alive, Yetu turned to Lily for an update. Young wanted to know what went down at the drugstore building too. Lily said that she and her mom remained in their room once the mutant fish showed up, but she had no idea what had transpired outside the block. She went on to say that her family resided at the pharmacy where her mother worked, and that they were unable to evacuate when the flood hit. Everyone, including her mother and herself, would go to the food store in the building across the street, she said. She went on to say that the mutant fish attacked when they were sleeping on top of the steps. At first sight, it's us. Despite her mother's best efforts, the cries from outside the second-floor pharmacy persisted till the following morning. Jang went on to tell her that their side was no different, since his companions had been attacked and wounded by the mutant fish the previous night. Yetu proceeded to inquire as to whether Lily was acquainted with Henry, the bald man on the neighboring floor. They thought Henry was attempting to get away from the mutant fish when he came on the third day via the cables, according to Lily's response. It was only then that they learned Henry had been an actual thief who had harmed others. Henry, she said, had harmed her mother and taken their water and food. Lily went on to explain that her mom was so concerned that Henry would come back and steal the food and water that she severed the cables outside the window. According to Lily, she was afraid she would go hungry after her mother severed the wires, so she went to ask Henry for food and drink, but she never came back. Crying ensued for Lily. After listening to Lily's account, Jang said that, in the midst of a disaster, people's worst qualities tend to surface. Henry had met his end, and maybe it was deserved, he told Lily as he begged her to stop crying. Still inconsolable, Lily demanded to know why her mother had left. Without knowing what to say, Jang hesitated for a while before answering. He speculated that maybe a helicopter had rescued her mother earlier in the day, but that she had been too busy to bring them with her because of time restrictions. As she watched events unfold, Yetu couldn't help but reflect on how hopeless their situation really was. They lied to youngsters to keep them from freaking out and gave them weapons to fight for their lives because they were in such a bad situation. Depending on their determination to survive and their capacity to work together, Yetu wondered how long they could face the difficulties that were ahead. The tense atmosphere was disturbed by the sudden sound of smashing glass, which startled Lily. Turning to face the disturbance, Yetu and Jang were startled to discover a school of mutant fish swarming towards them. All the mutant fish had been drawn to the noise they had made earlier, Jang realized. Gradually, each mutant fish started charging towards them, ready to strike, but they were able to protect themselves by firing their rifle at the approaching fish. Jang and Yetu were persuaded to drink by Lily, who yelled at them. Wutu, perplexed, wanted to know what she meant. According to Lily, the mutant fish's skin was extremely sensitive to alcohol, and she had previously witnessed someone using it to ward them off. Jang was urged by Yetu to quickly locate the booze. Even though Jang had warned Yetu not to yell because there were plenty of bottles, he had already started taking them out. They began tossing booze at the mutant fish one by one, but there were so many that it was having little impact. Jang advised that they flee after telling Yetu to stop wasting bullets, since there were too many mutant fish and not enough alcohol to scare them away. Jang and Lily started taking down the barriers they'd set up to secure the door. But Jang was astonished to see something when he opened the door. Jang was taken aback to witness Yetu being pursued by mutant fish, but to Jang's relief, Yetu skillfully evaded their advances and emerged victorious from the room. Using everything at his disposal, he swiftly barred the door. This was their opportunity to flee to the roof and devise a strategy, so Jang yelled out to Yetu, telling him to hurry to the steps. The mutant fish were always attempting to escape. As soon as Lily and the others saw the rooftop, they began to sprint towards it. They were taken aback when, out of nowhere, a mutant fish dove down and attacked Lily. Jang stepped in between them, putting himself in danger, as an impulsive attempt to shield her. In the heat of battle, the mutant fish bit Jang's hand, but he prevailed and saved Lily's life. Fear gripped Lily as blood spurted from Jang's hand. Yet, Jang convinced her that he was fine and begged her to unlock the entrance to the rooftop on the second floor. Additionally, he urged Yetu to move quickly. Suddenly, Yetu felt a tug away from the rooftop as he hurried towards it. He spun around to see that a mutant fish was engulfing a human. Surprisingly, it was Mark, begging Yetu to save him, and this startled Yetu. But Yetu saw the mutant fish swimming towards them, and Jang begged him not to pay attention to Mark because they were in grave danger. Yetu quickly escaped to safety after abandoning the bag with Mark, feeling trapped. Meanwhile, Lily made it to the very top floor and tried, but failed, to open the door. Lily was taken aback when, out of nowhere, the door swung open from the opposite side, sending her tumbling to the floor. A man brandishing a shotgun was visible to her as she raised her eyes to look up, but across the water, Yetu was ruthlessly firing down the mutant fish that had come after them. As the man inquired about his wound, Jang was taken aback to see mutant fish emerging from both the ground and the upper floor of the building. A fish was going to attack Jang, and Yetu yelled out a warning in a frantic voice as he saw this. Jang quickly covered his face to protect himself as he looked up and saw the fish charging at him, ready to attack. But they were taken aback when, instead of the handgun, they heard the distinct sound of a gun as Jang unlocked the sight of the mutant fish's death caused his pupils to enlarge. Their surprise was palpable as they rounded the bend to see Lily accompanied by a man brandishing a shotgun. Jang and Yetu were both curious as to the man's identity. The entire building had been invaded by mutated fish, which caused Lee and others to be concerned. They had to figure out what to do now that they were surrounded by strangers and didn't know how many mutant fish were in the structure. A strategy to deal with the problem needed to be developed.